My name is Grace Monroe. And that was the moment I realized loyalty meant nothing here. It happened at 9:02 a.m., just as I was reviewing the Q3 performance report that showed our team had exceeded revenue goals by 17%. Before I could even sip my coffee, Bradley Kane, the CEO, stormed into the glass-walled conference room like a thunderclap. I still remember the way the morning sunlight hit the glass walls of the conference room, warm and golden, a false promise of how the day would go. I'd barely taken a sip of my coffee when the door slammed open. Bradley Kane, our revered, feared CEO, stood there like a storm in a suit. No knock, no courtesy, just a presence that instantly sucked the air out of the room. "Grace, my office, now." It wasn't a request, it was an execution order. The kind that makes every head in the room snap up, then immediately drop, pretending not to see. My team looked away. A few offered me silent, pitiful glances, like they knew something I didn't. My heart thudded once, loud and deep, as I rose from my seat and followed him. He didn't wait for me to catch up. His stride was sharp, his back straight, a predator on home turf. We passed interns, accountants, marketing folks. Conversations died as we walked by. Eyes tracked us from behind computer screens, and I could feel the tension following me like static in the air. Inside his office, he didn't offer me a seat. He stayed standing. "We're restructuring," he said flatly, not meeting my eyes. "And we're letting you go." Just like that, no preamble, no performance review, no thank you for the 5 years of blood, sweat, and personal weekends I'd given to Monarch Dynamics. I blinked. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Was this a mistake? "You've done..." "Okay," he continued, his eyes now fixed coldly on me. "But we're moving in a new direction, one that requires stronger leadership, vision, assertiveness." His tone was sharp, cutting. Each word fell like a slap across the face. Not because of what he said, but because of what he meant. It wasn't about leadership or vision. It was about control, about power, about how a woman like me, soft-spoken, analytical, emotionally intelligent, never fit his mold of what a leader should be, especially not a woman. I could feel the blood rush to my face. The shame crept in, not from guilt, but from being blindsided, from knowing my dismissal had likely been whispered about behind closed doors, plotted in meetings I wasn't invited to. And now, I was being paraded out like a failed experiment. "You'll be escorted out by security," he added, almost as an afterthought. "HR has your exit documents." I stood there, silent, numb. My eyes scanned his face, searching for a flicker of remorse, of human decency. There was none. Just the smug satisfaction of a man who believed he'd won. He moved to the side, expecting me to walk out defeated, but I didn't give him that. I straightened my blazer, smoothed my hair, and nodded. "Thank you, Bradley, for the opportunity." His eyes narrowed, confused by my composure. I turned and walked out, each step heavier than the last. As I exited his office, every pair of eyes in the hallway turned to me. Curiosity, pity, shock. No one said a word, but their silence screamed. The humiliation wasn't in being fired. It was in the theater of it, the spectacle. He could have done it quietly, privately, respectfully, but he chose to do it publicly. On purpose, to send a message. I didn't cry, not yet. But inside, I felt like a vase that had just been cracked, still holding its shape, but barely. I was too stunned to process it fully, too hurt to be angry, too proud to break. As I walked to HR, the sting of betrayal clung to me like a second skin. I had given everything to that company, sacrificed time, energy, health, and in return, a humiliating dismissal, no warning, no gratitude, just a cold goodbye from a man who never once saw my worth. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the story wasn't over. Not even close. Before everything unraveled, I wasn't just an employee at Monarch Dynamics. I was one of its pillars. For over a decade, I had built marketing campaigns that tripled our product reach, mentored young talent who later became team leads, and weathered the company through 2 major rebrands. My name was attached to the firm's biggest growth milestones. People often joked that if Monarch had a soul, I was part of it. But none of that mattered the day Bradley Kane stepped into power. Bradley, who inherited his position rather than earning it, barely knew what I did. To him, I was just another name on a spreadsheet. What stung more than his condescension was how quickly my history with the company was erased. Meetings I once led were reassigned. Projects I had nurtured were credited to others. I went from being our best strategist to just her, a ghost in the office I helped build. And yet, while upper management pretended I had outlived my usefulness, there were people who hadn't forgotten. One of them was Vanessa Hill, a quiet force in the HR department. Vanessa wasn't flashy, always tucked behind her desk with reading glasses slipping down her nose, but she saw everything. She was the kind of woman who remembered birthdays, who sent handwritten notes to new hires, and who never said much in meetings. But when she did, everyone listened. She had watched me put in the late nights, advocate for team members, and clean up messes others ignored. In whispered hallway conversations and quick glances exchanged across rooms, I began to realize that I wasn't alone. Some younger employees, those I had mentored, would linger a second longer after meetings just to ask, "You okay?" Others sent subtle LinkedIn messages of support. It wasn't loud, but it was there. A quiet loyalty, brewing just beneath the surface. They weren't in a position to speak up, not yet, but I could feel it in their hesitation when asked to replace me on certain accounts, or their discomfort when forced to praise the new direction under Bradley. I wasn't just being pushed out. I was being deliberately rewritten. My legacy scraped clean like chalk on a board. And maybe, for a moment, they thought I would let it happen. They had no idea what was coming next. When Bradley Kane fired me, he expected a scene. Maybe he hoped I'd cry, scream, or beg, not because he needed the drama, but because it would confirm what he already believed, that I was fragile, over-emotional, and unfit to lead in a modern corporate world. But I didn't give him that satisfaction. I stood up, smoothed my blazer, collected my things, and walked out. Not a word, not a glance back. But inside, I was burning. That quiet exit wasn't weakness, it was strategy. I knew the people watching, the ones too afraid to speak up, would remember that moment. Not the firing, but the way I carried myself. Because that's what leaders do, even when they're gutted. I didn't drive straight home. Instead, I parked 3 blocks away and just sat in silence, hands clenched around the steering wheel, replaying every second. His smug tone, the way he said, "It's just business." The look on Vanessa's face, shock, then sadness. And worst of all, the emptiness that came with knowing the company I had given my life to had tossed me aside like yesterday's news. But rage, no matter how righteous, is a terrible decision-maker. So I let it simmer. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on my porch, and started a new notebook. Not for revenge, not yet, just documentation, reflection, strategy. 1 page turned into 5, then 10. By midnight, I wasn't crying, I was plotting. Because here's the thing about being underestimated. It gives you time, it gives you space, and if you're smart, it gives you leverage. I knew I would return, but not like they expected, not to ask for my job back, not to make peace. I'd return with power, quiet, undeniable, and absolute. And the first move? Silence. The storm was coming. They just didn't know it yet. 2 days after I was fired, a letter arrived. Thick envelope, old-fashioned seal. My father's handwriting on the front. It stopped me cold. Robert Monroe was a man of few words, but when he spoke, you listened. And even now, 2 years after his passing, he was still finding ways to speak to me. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a handwritten note and a legal document. The note read, "Grace, I built Monarch Dynamics with the hope that one day, someone with vision, not ego, would lead it forward. I believe that person is you. If you're reading this, then the moment has come. Use this wisely. With love, Dad. Below the letter was the transfer confirmation. 90% of the company's founding shares, held in trust, now under my name. I sat there in disbelief. 90%, not 10. Not a symbolic piece. The company was mine. The tears came, not from shock, but from something deeper, a quiet affirmation that he had seen me, that he had known this day would come, that he had trusted me to be ready. I thought back to the late nights as a teenager, sitting across from him at the kitchen table, watching him sketch out business models on napkins. I remembered how he never once questioned my ability because I was a girl, or because I was too soft. Instead, he taught me that compassion and strength weren't opposites, they were partners. Power, he once told me, isn't about control, it's about stewardship. If you can carry something heavy without crushing what's under it, you're ready. Now I held the weight. And suddenly, everything changed. That firing, it wasn't an ending, it was a beginning, carefully set in motion by the man who built the empire, and now it was mine to reclaim. But I wouldn't storm in. I'd play it exactly as he taught me. Quiet, smart, purposeful, like a queen in a chess game, calm, invisible, until checkmate. The old me might have walked back into Monarch Dynamics the next morning, stormed the executive suite, and demanded justice. But I wasn't that woman anymore. This time, I didn't rush. I didn't even flinch. I called Julia Beck. Julia wasn't just my attorney. She was my late father's legal pit bull. Brilliant, unshakable, and surgically precise. If there was a loophole, she'd find it. If there was a cover-up, she'd peel it back layer by layer until the truth bled out. I met her in a quiet corner booth at a downtown cafe. No phones, no notes, just sharp minds and hotter coffee. "I need you to help me burn this down," I said. Julia smiled slowly, like someone who had just been handed the final puzzle piece. "Let's do it legally," she replied. "But make no mistake, it will burn." That marked the beginning of my silent comeback. Over the next few weeks, Julia and I quietly gathered intel. Irregular financial statements, HR complaints buried under NDAs, whispers of misconduct. I didn't need to fabricate anything. Bradley Kane's rot was already there. We just had to shine a light on it. Meanwhile, I returned to Monarch, not through the front doors, but in the shadows. Sometimes I walked the campus as a visitor during open seminars. Other times I posed as an external consultant during public workshops. No one looked twice. No one expected the woman who had been humiliated and dismissed to be watching, measuring. And what I saw gutted me. The company culture I once helped nurture had decayed into something toxic. Employees were quiet, heads down, afraid. Gone were the spontaneous brainstorms and laughter in the break room. In their place, silence, tension, fear. Even the lobby plants looked like they'd given up. Everywhere I turned, I saw missed potential, bright minds stifled by fear, leaders replaced by managers who only knew how to say no. And yet, I said nothing. I recorded everything. I wasn't there to inspire. Not yet. This wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. And it would be done not with rage, but with precision. Like a surgeon or a sniper. Because power doesn't need to shout. It waits. And I was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. There's a difference between being strict and being toxic. Bradley Kane was never just difficult. He was dangerous. For weeks, Julia and I built the case quietly. Emails, policy violations, confidential interviews, but the tipping point came when Vanessa Hill reached out. Vanessa was a senior HR analyst at Monarch. Quiet, observant, and always underestimated. I had once mentored her when she was just starting out. She hadn't forgotten. She asked to meet in a parking garage. Yes, really. Level 3B, far corner, 8 p.m. Paranoid? Maybe. Smart? Absolutely. When I got there, she didn't waste time. "I kept copies," she said, sliding a flash drive across the seat. "Backed up everything, threatening emails, voicemails, meeting transcripts, even employee exit interviews they tried to erase. I stared at the drive in my hand. It felt like a weapon. Because it was. What Vanessa had saved was damning. Not just policy violations. It was a pattern of intimidation. Internal memos where Bradley silenced complaints with veiled threats. Audio from meetings where he berated staff into submission. One clip had him say, laughing, "Let them quit! Cheaper than severance!" Julia's reaction said it all. We could take this to the board right now. They'd have no choice but to remove him. But I hesitated. This wasn't just about taking him down. It was about what would rise in his place. A public bloodbath might satisfy the angry part of me, but would it rebuild what we'd lost? I stood at a crossroads. Option 1. Scorched earth. Release everything. Watch him fall fast and hard. Option 2. A smarter war. Use the evidence not to destroy, but to negotiate. For power, for change, for the future I believed in. The Grace Monroe from a year ago would have wanted revenge, but the woman holding this flash drive, she wanted legacy, and legacy required something deeper than retribution. It required strategy. So I looked at Julia. Not yet. First, we take the room. The boardroom. There are moments in life when the air changes, when you can feel the shift before a single word is spoken. That morning, the boardroom at Monarch Dynamics was humming with the usual noise. Small talk, paper shuffling. The self-satisfied laughter of executives who believed they were untouchable. Bradley Kane sat at the head of the table like a king in his court. He had no idea the crown was about to slip. I walked in, calm, steady, flanked by Julia Beck, my attorney, and 2 senior partners from the firm. I watched the room freeze, forks midair, eyes darting. Then came the silence. Bradley's smirk twitched just slightly. "Grace," he said. "Didn't expect to see you here." I smiled. I know. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Julia opened her case file. With quiet precision, she laid out the documentation on the conference table. The inheritance papers from my father, Robert Monroe, validating my 90% majority shareholding, certified and notarized. Then came a second folder, the one Vanessa helped build. Internal misconduct reports, audio recordings, policy violations, all cross-checked, time-stamped, and damning. Bradley leaned forward, trying to maintain control. "This is absurd. She's not even—" "You don't need to speak right now," Julia cut in, her voice like polished steel. "You may want to consult your own legal counsel before making further statements." The board was stunned. I could see the chair of finance doing the math in his head. The VP of operations looked down at the evidence with shaking hands. No one spoke in Bradley's defense. No one dared. Power, real power, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and everyone still hears it. I didn't look at Bradley again. He wasn't the focus anymore. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. "I'm here to protect the future of Monarch Dynamics," I said, addressing the room. "Not to destroy what we built, but to return it to something worthy of the name." No theatrics, no anger, just truth. And a stack of documents no one could deny. Bradley stood up, desperate. "You can't just— This company—" But the chairman cleared his throat. "Mr. Kane," he said slowly, "I believe it's time you stepped outside. Effective immediately." And just like that, the man who once humiliated me in front of this very room walked out alone. I stayed standing for a moment longer. Let the silence stretch. Let it settle. Because sometimes silence isn't empty. It's full of everything they didn't see coming. Leadership, I've learned, isn't about volume. It's not about fear, control, or sitting at the tallest chair in the room. Bradley Kane ruled Monarch Dynamics like a warlord. He led through intimidation, closed-door meetings, veiled threats, constant reshuffling. People performed not because they believed, but because they were afraid. You could feel it in the hallways. The tight shoulders, the fake smiles, the way voices dropped when he walked past. I didn't want to be that kind of leader. I never did. So on my first day back, truly back, I didn't hold a press conference. I didn't call an emergency board meeting. Instead, I gathered the department heads in the open-floor atrium. No podium, no titles, just eye contact and honesty. "I'm not here to fix everything overnight," I began, "but I am here to lead differently and to build something we can all believe in again." There was a pause. Then came the quiet lean-ins, the scribbling of notes, the subtle widening of eyes. I spoke of rebuilding trust, of empowering voices that had been silenced. I announced a sweeping overhaul of the leadership structure, promoting key talents who had been overlooked, including several women who had spent years carrying the company quietly from behind the scenes. Vanessa Hill was one of them. I could see her in the back, eyes slightly wet, hands folded neatly. I nodded to her, not just as a thank you, but as a promise that loyalty and integrity would finally be rewarded, not punished. I also introduced a new Diversity and Equity Council with real decision-making power, not just a PR move. For the first time in years, the executive board would reflect the people who actually made the company great. People whispered later that the energy felt different, lighter, more hopeful. Some called it idealistic. I called it necessary. I replaced Bradley's empty motivational posters with quotes from real employees, their struggles, their wins, their ideas. I created a rotating chair at the leadership table for someone new every month, someone outside the C-suite, so no one forgot where the real work happens. The whispers turned into conversations. The conversations turned into collaboration. Within weeks, the tension in the office began to lift. People stopped checking over their shoulders. They started showing up early, not out of fear, but because they believed they were part of something that finally made sense. One afternoon, while walking through the break room, a junior analyst stopped me. "I just wanted to say," she said, a little nervously, "we notice, all of it, and it matters." I smiled. It matters to me, too. This wasn't just about reclaiming power. It was about redefining what power meant. And in that moment, I knew Monarch Dynamics wasn't just healing, it was becoming something new. The hardest part of rebuilding isn't the strategy. It's the silence. The kind that lingers in break rooms, that hums beneath polite nods in elevators. The kind that says, "We're still hurting, but we don't know if it's safe to say so." I knew Monarch Dynamics wouldn't heal with a memo, or even a leadership change. It needed something deeper, something human. So we started with listening. Every Thursday morning, I hosted open forums we called Coffee and Clarity. No agenda, just real voices in a circle, from interns to senior managers, sharing what had gone wrong, what they still feared, and what they hoped we could fix. Some spoke through tears. Some didn't speak at all, just showed up, holding eye contact for the first time in years. I listened. No defending, no justifying, just listened. Then came the HR overhaul. We dismantled the old structures that had enabled toxicity and rebuilt them from the ground up. We brought in third-party ombudsmen. We introduced anonymous feedback systems. We shifted performance reviews to focus on collaboration and well-being, not just numbers. And the office itself, it had to change. We tore down the glass partitions that had symbolized hierarchy, replaced them with open lounges, cozy corners, and real plants instead of plastic ones. Every wall had space for post-its, ideas, concerns, thank yous, even drawings from employees' kids. It stopped looking like a fortress, started feeling like a home. But perhaps the hardest and most necessary thing I did was apologize. We sent personal letters to those who had been unfairly laid off during Bradley's tenure. For some, it was too little too late, but others responded. Some cried. One even mailed back the letter, scribbled with, "I never thought I'd see this day. Thank you for remembering." And then came the board in the lobby. It started as a blank whiteboard, something small, temporary, a space for anyone to share feedback or write notes to the leadership. But within days, it became something else entirely. Post-it after post-it began appearing. "Thanks for seeing us. My first full breath in years. I stayed because of you." And one that stopped me cold. You made the company I dreamed of working for. Finally! One morning, as I arrived early, coffee in hand, I stood in front of that wall. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of notes now layered it like feathers on wings. Soft, colorful, full of messy, beautiful handwriting. Right in the center, in bold black ink, was one simple message. Thank you, Grace Monroe. I didn't cry, not then. But I held my breath for a moment. Because I realized, culture isn't just a statement, it's a living, breathing thing. And for the first time in a very long time, it was alive again. The auditorium was filled to capacity. Employees, partners, board members, and press. But it was the silence that struck me the most. The kind of stillness that only happens when people sense they're about to witness something final, something meaningful. I stepped onto the stage. No spotlight, no teleprompter, just a microphone, my breath, and everything I had carried for over a decade. I looked out at the crowd and began. A long time ago, my father told me, leadership isn't a throne, Grace. It's a promise. At the time, I didn't understand. I thought he meant being kind, but now I know. He meant being accountable. He meant showing up when it's hard. He meant seeing people, not just positions. Somewhere in the front row, a woman in HR, the same one who once avoided eye contact with me in the hallway, nodded, eyes shimmering. When I left Monarch, I didn't leave defeated. I left deliberate. Because I knew that change doesn't come through rage. It comes through clarity. Through work. Through time. Through refusing to become what hurt you. I paused. The air was thick, raw. Then, I reached into my pocket and unfolded a small, worn piece of paper. A note my father had left for me in his will. Just 4 words scribbled in his unmistakable handwriting. Build what we dreamed. I held it up. This isn't just about a company. It's about culture, about trust, about legacy. It's about creating rooms where voices are heard, not silenced. Tables where ideas are shared, not stolen. And doors that open, for everyone. I took a breath, steady but full. Leadership isn't about control. It's not about being the smartest, loudest, or most feared in the room. Leadership is about lifting people. It's about being the kind of person others believe they can become. A hush swept the crowd, and then, applause. Not polite, not rehearsed, a standing ovation that started slow and swelled like a wave. People rose, some clapped through tears. Even those who once whispered that I was just a legacy hire now looked at me with something different. Not pity, not fear, but respect. As I stepped off the stage, my eyes met Vanessa Hills, her smile steady, proud. Julia, my lawyer and friend, mouthed the words, he'd be proud. And for the first time, I believed it. Because this wasn't just the end of a fight. It was the beginning of something better. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of that old company now reborn, I could almost hear my father's voice. Well done, Grace.